Okay, here we're starting chapter 14, The Honest Tradesman. This is all about Jerry Cruncher. So you might remember that back at the beginning of the book, in book one, Jerry Cruncher gives us hints about his other profession, which is, he does something else besides sitting outside Tellson's on a stool. And we're going to find out completely in this chapter what it is he does. It begins with, to the eyes of Mr. Jeremiah Cruncher. So we're getting his full name, which I think just reminds us that he thinks he's a very important person. And he's sitting outside his stool on Tellson's front stoop there with his grizzly urchin, which this would be young Jerry, his son. And they're watching just the people come and go. And all of a sudden, there is a significant amount of people coming, and they can hear the noise of many, many people coming. It does have us sort of consider here, what are some other things that he might do? And it says, since a small part of his income was derived from the pilotage of timid women, mostly of a full habit and past the middle term of life, from Tellson's side of the tides to the opposite shore. So this means that one of the odd jobs he does is he escorts women who are going between England and France. And when they mention like full habit, it just means like fully dressed with lots of clothes. And these are elderly women, perhaps. And so like that's one of the things he does. But that's not the main thing we're going to learn about in this chapter. It says here that this was a season when the crowds were few and belated women few, and when his affairs in general were unprosperous. So whatever his other odd jobs are, he's not really very busy right now. And so this makes him suspicious that his wife has been praying, flopping against him, because he yelled at her for praying against him, because whatever his odd job is, she considers it to be evil. And then they realize that the noise that's coming up the street is a funeral procession. And Mr. Cruncher gets very excited. It's a burying, he tells young Jerry. And young Jerry yells, hooray! And this is an interesting thing I underlined. The young gentleman uttered this exultant sound with mysterious significance. Don't really know why young Jerry would be excited about a funeral, but we'll find out later. And Mr. Cruncher yells at him for cheering for a funeral. He's like, no more of this hurraying, no more of this. And he kind of swats him on the cheek. And then as the people come closer, the crowd around the carriage with the hearse and the mourners, they're all yelling, spies, spies. And the funerals, it says here, are at all times a remarkable attraction to Mr. Cruncher. He always pricked up his senses and became excited when a funeral passed Tellson's. Naturally, therefore, a funeral with this uncommon attendance excited him greatly, and he asked of the first man who ran against him, who is it? Who died? And nobody knows. They just know whoever's in that casket is a spy, and they keep saying spies, spies. And then eventually he finds out that the dead man is Roger Cly. So Roger Cly was from chapter 3. He is Darnay's servant who testified against him in the trial. And remember that there was suspicion that perhaps Roger Cly and John Barsad, who was the other man who testified against Darnay, were spies. And so apparently Roger Cly has been discovered to be an Old Bailey spy, which means he's a spy for the court itself, which just reminds us that the court itself is corrupt. So he's dead. It's confirmed that he's dead. There's a lot of description here about how crazy the crowd is. They try to open the coach doors. The mourners get out. They chase the mourners and try to rob them. Some of their clothes fall off, like coats and bags and things, and the mob takes their possessions. So this whole rest of this page is really about just what a mob this is and how unruly they are. And then there's a reference to a bear leader. This would have been a popular street character, some sort of entertainer is out there chasing around. And so it's just craziness, disorderly. Every step, more and more people are following it. The shops are nervous about looting, so they start closing up their doors. So all of this is just a continuation of mob behavior. Finally, they get to the churchyard, and Jerry Cruncher follows along. And after all the people have finally left, he stays to confer with the undertakers. So the people who work at the churchyard where the gravestones are, he talks to them privately. The place has a soothing influence on him. He procures a pipe from a neighboring public house and smokes it along the railings and considers the spot. Jerry, said Mr. Cruncher, talking to his younger son, you see that there Clyde that day, and you see with your own eyes that he was a young'un and straight made one, so he was a young man. And then he sends young Jerry home, and on the way, he stops to check in with his medical advisor. It makes it sound like, oh, maybe he's not feeling well, or he needs to just stop in and see him with a question. But he does stop to see a distinguished surgeon on his way home. When he gets home, he yells at his wife. He says, if as an honest tradesman, my ventures go wrong tonight, meaning like my ventures go wrong, I shall make sure that you've been praying against me, and I shall work you for it just the same as if I've seen you do it. So like he's telling her, if anything goes wrong tonight, it's because you've been praying against me and it's going to be your fault. And Mrs. Cruncher shakes her head and she says, I haven't said anything. And she promises that she hasn't been praying. And he says, well, you might be meditating about it, which means like you could be quietly praying against me. He doesn't trust her at all. And so she does confirm that he's going out tonight. And he says, yes, I am. And young Jerry says, can I go with you? And Jerry Cruncher says, no, you may not. As your mother knows, I'm going fishing. That's where I'm going, fishing. And young Jerry notices that the fishing rod is rather rusty, which means that like it's not really used very often, but yet he says he's going fishing all the time. He asks if he'll bring home any fish, and he says, I don't know, we'll see. He's not going out until after young Jerry has gone to bed. So young Jerry supposedly goes to bed, and Mr. Cruncher says to Mrs. Cruncher, mind you, no games tomorrow. Actually, I'm sorry, he says this to both of them. He says, no games tomorrow. If I, as an honest tradesman, succeed in providing a jint of meat or two, none of your not touching of it and sticking to bread. If I, as an honest tradesman, am able to provide a little beer, none of your declaring on water. When you go to Rome, do as Rome does. Rome will be an ugly customer to you if you don't. I'm your Rome, you know. So he's saying that in the past, when he would make extra money and bring home good food, his wife would not eat it. Or if he brought home beer, she would only drink water. So he wants young Jerry and his wife to appreciate the fact that sometimes he can provide better food for them. And then he says, you cannot call yourself a mother if you don't want your son to eat well. Do you call yourself a mother and not know that a mother's first duty is to blow her boy out, which means fatten him up, make him strong and healthy? He wants them to eat well. So young Jerry has not gone to bed yet. So he touches young Jerry on a tender place just to sort of show I care about you as a son. And then as the evening gets later, young Jerry is ordered to bed right down here. And he obeys that order. And Mrs. Cruncher goes to bed and Jerry sits around smoking a pipe until 1 a.m. At 1 a.m, he gets up and he opens a locked cupboard and he takes out, these could be quiz questions, a sack, a crowbar of convenient size, a rope and chain, and other fishing tackle of the nature. Clerks, this is not fishing tackle. Young Jerry, who had only made a feint of undressing when he went to bed, was not long after his father. So a feint means like he pretends to be getting ready for bed, but he actually lays awake and waits until his father leaves, and then he follows him. And so this next page is describing how young Jerry stays along the side of the buildings and the houses. He stays in the shadows to make sure that his father doesn't see him. Within a half hour from their house, so they've been walking 30 minutes, they pick up, Jerry Cruncher picks up another fisherman. And so by the time they get to their destination, there are 3 men. So it's Jerry Cruncher and 2 others who are ending up at a graveyard. So they are at the graveyard where Roger Cly was buried earlier that day. So young Jerry approaches the gate and he's very nervous. He's like, oh my gosh, this is creepy. This is where the dead bodies are. And he stands off in the distance at the gate and he can see them as they, quote unquote, begin to fish. They fish with a spade at first. So clearly, if you haven't figured this out by now, they are digging up the casket of Roger Cly. And as soon as young Jerry recognizes that they're pulling up a casket, he absolutely freaks out and he runs away. He even imagines that the coffin he had seen was running after him. So he's absolutely traumatized by the fact that his dad and these other 2 guys dug up the casket. So young Jerry runs home, goes to bed, and just I'm sure hides his head under the pillow. From his oppressed slumber, young Jerry in his closet, meaning his small room, was awakened after daybreak and before sunrise by the presence of his father in the family room. Something had gone wrong with him, at least so young Jerry inferred, from the circumstance of his holding Mrs. Cruncher by the ears and knocking the back of her head against the headboard of the bed. So he's beating her and he's yelling at her. He said, I told you, and I did. Jerry, 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 his wife implored, you oppose yourself to the profit of the business, and me and my partners suffer. You was to honor and obey. Why the devil don't you? So we can infer that something went wrong at the graveyard. Either there was no body. This is probably the case. There was probably no body in that casket. Somebody got to the casket before Jerry Cruncher did. And she says, I try to be a good wife. And he yells and yells and yells. A good wife would not, pray against her husband's business. If you're an honest tradesman, you cannot occupy your female mind with calculations when he took to his trade or when he hadn't. Honoring and obeying wife would let his trade alone. You call yourself a religious woman. If you're a religious woman, give me an irreligious one. So he's like, I'd rather be married to a woman who's not religious so that I could have success in the trade that brings him the most money. So the day begins. Down here we have young Jerry walking with a stool under his arm at his father's side along the sunny and crowded Fleet Street. So they're heading off to Tellson's to sit on their stools again. Young Jerry, from him of the previous night, running home through darkness and solitude from his grim pursuer. His cunning was fresh with the day, and his qualms were gone with the night, in which particulars it is not improbable that he had compeers in Fleet Street and the city of London that fine morning. So young Jerry is over the trauma from the night before once he got home to the safety of his bed. And young Jerry says, Father, what's a resurrection man? So this is interesting. This just shows that young Jerry is observing and listening to what goes on around him. He's putting together the pieces. Hopefully you have too. And his father he's a tradesman. His goods is a branch of scientific goods. Person's bodies, ain't it, Father? Said the lively boy. Something of that sort, said Mr. Cruncher. And young Jerry says, I should like to be a resurrection man when I'm quite grown up. So this is flattering to Jerry Cruncher because, of course, this is exactly what he is. And Mr. Cruncher was soothed. It's like, well, it's nice that he wants to do what I do. It makes him feel better. It depends on how you develop your talents, he says to his son, Be careful to develop your talents and never to say no more than you can help to nobody, and there's no telling at the present time what you may not come to be fit for. Okay, so what is a resurrection man? Obviously, we figured out that they're pulling bodies out of the graveyard. Why? They're doing this because in that time period, they didn't have things like cadavers. Like now, medical students, the first class they take is anatomy and physiology with a cadaver, and they learn through dissection all the parts of the body. That was not the case during this time period. So people would grave rob and then sell those dead bodies to doctors. And so the reason Jerry Cruncher stopped at the surgeon's on his way home from the graveyard was to see if he wanted to buy the body, because then he would go and dig it up with his two friends, and then the three of them would split the money. Obviously, there's competition for this kind of thing, and somebody else got to it first. That's what we can infer. But we can see from this chapter that Jerry Cruncher is making a lot of money doing this. He's also making money doing other odd jobs by escorting people back and forth from London to France. So if you think back to the beginning, when in book 1, when Jerry Cruncher was riding his horse to the mail carriage to give the message to Mr. Lorry that said recalled to life, on his way back home on his horse, Jerry Cruncher kept saying to himself, oh gosh, wouldn't that be terrible in my line of work if recalled to life, became a thing? And that's because, wouldn't it be terrible if he was digging up a body and that body was recalled to life? Clearly, that would be an issue. So we finally find out what exactly it is that Jerry Cruncher does.